Hey, what's going on? It's now 3 o'clock. Chad here. Hope you're enjoying your Tuesday afternoon. Shocking news out of the NBA today. The Denver Nuggets have cleaned house with less than a week before the playoffs begin. The team has fired both general manager Calvin Booth and head coach Michael Malone. Denver is currently fourth in the West. Malone won a title in 2023 as the winningest coach in franchise history. Trailblazers play their final road game of the season tomorrow night in Utah against the Jazz. Tip-off is scheduled for 6. Our coverage begins with the Blazers game day at 4 with Chris Burkhardt. After Utah, the Blazers host the Warriors Friday night and the Lakers on Sunday afternoon for Fan Appreciation Day. Sunday's tip scheduled for 12:30. Tickets are available at trailblazers.com. The Mariners sit with a record of 4-7. Seattle will host Houston tonight. First pitch from T-Mobile Park is 6:40. Luis Castillo gets a start for the M's. Got the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing coming up next. Final Trailblazer ticket Tuesday of the season coming up at 5:45.
It's time for the Rip City Drive, brought to you by Goldberg Jones. Divorce for Men, 1-800-DIVORCE. Featuring the crazy and often irrational longtime Portland radio vet, Chad Doing.
Now a 2-0 pitch. Ohtani swings, hammers it deep to right. This one's heading back to the wall. It is gone, a home run.
Uzan on the right-hand wing, stops with 7 seconds, gives it to Cryer, 6 seconds to go, 5 seconds to Sharp, top of the key, lost the dribble, he's got to pick it up, it's scooped up by Condon, Condon secures it, and Florida found a way! From 12 down to the school's third national championship in men's basketball. 65-63 the final. The Florida Gators are the national champions once again.
It was known within the league that there was a possibility that the Nuggets would move on from Calvin Booth despite him helping construct a championship team.
This is stunning because we're just days away from the end of the regular season, days away from the start of the NBA playoffs. This is tied with Hubie Brown in 1980-81 season for the deepest into a regular season we've seen a coach get fired.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Doing starts now.
All right, what's going on, my friends? Well, we got a crazy day in sports and a very good show lined up for you today. At 5 o'clock, we will head to Denver. My good friend Brandon Cristal will join us to get the latest from the Nuggets and what's going on with the firing of head coach Michael Malone, a stunner in the NBA. So Brandon Cristal is going to be at 5. We'll talk Masters with PGA David Coleman at 5:20. I want to get his take on the Masters. He's put out his predictions, so we'll talk about what to expect from the course, any of the changes that have gone down, and who he thinks is going to get over in the tournament. So he'll join us at 5:20. Now, coming up here in about 15 to 20 minutes, my good friend John Bladholm is going to be in the studio. We'll talk about the Oregon Championship Tour and, of course, the Oregon Charity Championships, but also going to be very happy to welcome in a very good man into studio, Jeff Keller, who is a Gold Star dad. He runs the USO out at PDX, which is a place for military individuals to relax. He lost his son to enemy fire back in August of 2012, and he was just 22 years old. And so he made some changes in his life, and he's, going through a process of giving back, which is awesome. His story is unique, and we'll get some details on the USO golf tournament, which is coming up, and a chance for you to make a difference in someone that is, doing the best to honor his son and others who have battled for our freedom. So looking forward to the conversation with Jeff and John. And then you're going to hear from our Trailblazer insider, Sean Hyken, who's going to join us coming up at 4:20. But I do want to focus in for a moment on Michael Malone and the firing with Denver. Now, I know a lot of people in the Denver area, and from what I can gather, it sounds like he was losing the locker room. Now, Michael Malone is a great coach. He won a championship a couple years ago, but he's also one of those guys who, with his personality and his intensity, he can grind on you and wear on you because he's relentless. And apparently, he and Calvin Booth, both very strong-willed, were not seeing eye to eye. And the way it's been described is there was a bit of a Cold War that was going on inside the Nuggets front office. But this came after the game here in Portland just, a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, after the Nuggets had lost and they were going through a bit of a cold streak. I think they're like 11-12 or 11-13 since the All-Star break. Their defense has fallen off the cliff, and mostly that's because of roster construction. When you start paying the superstars big money, you don't have enough to be able to have guys like Contavious Caldwell-Pope who can contribute, or Jeff Green, or Bruce Brown, or other guys off the bench, right? You have to take away from somewhere. And what happens is when you start paying 3 or 4 guys big cash, you don't have the resources to put into the roster. So, a lot of the reason why the Nuggets aren't maybe where they were a couple of years ago, it's not because Michael Malone suddenly forgot how to coach. It's because he doesn't have the same players. When you replace quality backups with guys like Russell Westbrook who have a propensity for screwing up in big moments, these are the type of things that happen. But take a listen to Michael Malone. It's not too often where you hear a head coach in the NBA admit that guys have no interest in watching film, but that's exactly what he did after the loss here in Portland.
I think each guy's got to look themselves in the mirror and start coming to each respective game with the proper mindset and have some pride. I didn't think we played with any pride tonight.
How do you feel like they took that?
I don't really care. It's not my job to evaluate how they take things. My job is to be honest, and sometimes brutally honest. And tonight, it was a brutally honest message. And the guys that are full of shit won't hear it. They'll say coach is tripping. And the guys that maybe do really care will, because they're not going to go back and watch their minutes, because nobody watches their minutes. Nobody watches film. So we'll have to show them the film. And I said, if somebody disagrees with me, please speak up. And nobody said a word. So, again, I'm not really concerned with how they took that message. My thing is being honest with how we just played. Just got blown out in L.A. Come here against a team that is down 3, 4, 5 starters, and you mess around with the game. That's what happens. And that's exactly what happened tonight. And the same thing that's been bothering us of late that I talked about pregame, the turnovers, the rebounding, was even worse tonight. And I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did.
Wow. There's Coach Malone. That's how he communicates. He's very direct. He's hard on his guys, and he has no problem airing them out to the press if he feels like that's a necessary thing to do. But that sounded to me like he was losing some of the guys in the locker room. And you know how it works in the NBA. I mean, obviously, a lot of those guys do respect Coach Malone, but when you have the same voice over an extended period of time, on you nonstop with that type of intensity, sometimes, guys grow tired of that. And there's a lot of coaches who believe that, your voice as a coach has a shelf life with a particular team. And then they'll step aside. Larry Bird coached only for a few years with the Pacers and walked away because, he was a big believer that, players lose interest in the same voice over a period of time. But I also heard that one of the owners, Kroenke, was on the bench recently in Denver. And it's rare that he sits on the bench, but, he was probably down there to monitor because he had a meeting, with the players just to see what type of communication was going on and how the situation was playing out. And so they've elected to make the change. Now, the weird part is when you get an organization, when they make a move like this late in the season, and I think this ties Hubie Brown's dismissal back in like 80 or 81 as the latest in-season coaching fire in history. But they put out the messaging of, hey, we believe this is what's best for the team right now. We're still focused on competing for a championship this year, and we believe this move puts us in the best position to do that. I mean, that's just nonsense. That's just organizational speak, right? You can't get rid of a championship coach like Michael Malone and then put in a guy with no experience and expect to be better. So, my thought is like if the owner wants to make a move and he believes that this is the best time to do it, he wants to get a, jumpstart that, then you make the move. I mean, Denver's not going to win the title anyways, more than likely, because I don't think they're good enough. They're definitely good enough to make a run in the playoffs, but not good enough to win a championship. So I'm sure the owner's like, whatever, we'll go out and make the move. The good news is that Rick Adelman's son, David Adelman, is going to be the interim coach. Now, obviously, I'm a big fan of Rick Adelman. I'm a big fan of David Adelman. I think he's got the potential to become a good head coach. And I do have a guy in Denver that believes that one of the reasons why they made the move now is because they want to get an extended look at David Adelman to see what type of job he can do. And if he's able to, handle the pressure, deal with this difficult situation, and the team has some success in the playoffs, then I think he's going to have a great chance to get the job. Now, if he falls flat on his face, then they'll open it up to a full coaching search. But at least we know now that David Adelman's got a good chance to, secure the gig. And the same person also believes that, keep an eye on potential coaches that they may be looking for in the future. Keep an eye on guys who want to feature the pick and roll, obviously because of Jokic. He's a freaking, big man who runs the pick and roll like a guard. He's a freak. So you want a coach that's going to feature the pick and roll and also someone that has a good communication style and a way to connect with European players. And for obvious reasons. And there you have it. So, we'll see how things shake out. My guess is taking over a job under these circumstances would be brutal. But when you have Nikola Jokic, that probably makes your job a lot easier because he's the best player in the world. So I wish the best to David Adelman. It's unfortunate that it has to be under these circumstances, but there have been a lot of people in the past, athletes and coaches alike, who have, taken on a brutal situation, thrived, and then end up parlaying that into better opportunity. But pretty crazy. Absolutely crazy. And the weird part about Denver right now, they're fourth in the West. And I hope it remains that way because they're on pace to match up with the Golden State Warriors in the first round. Someone said that whoever the Nuggets face should hire Malone on a 10-day contract to have him on the bench when they face the Nuggets. Steve Kerr should do that. But the Warriors and Nuggets will be a wildly fascinating series because you got the storyline with Malone. You got Steph Curry, who's on fire. And then you got Jimmy Butler, who came over in the deal from Miami. And now the Warriors believe they got an outside shot to make a run. And maybe one of the teams that could take out Oklahoma City potentially. But if you get Denver and Golden State in the first round, give me that all day. And it goes back to the player movement. Everyone complains about, players doing this or doing that. But the player movement in the NBA this year in the West has made the playoffs fascinating. Because now you got Luka in LA with LeBron, and you've got Jimmy Butler with the Warriors with Dre and Steph. And, knowing that you've bolstered those two legendary brands with the chance to do something and maybe make a run. And then you got Oklahoma City just sitting there coasting right into the playoffs with 60-plus wins with their soon-to-be MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So we'll see how it shakes out. But that's it. That's the deal. Big moves, right? Memphis lets go of their coach, and Denver's like, here, hold my beer. We'll just drop Michael Malone right now. Oh, my goodness. So I don't know. What I'm always wondering is, the Mavericks are just stupid. They trade Luka, and you keep waiting for some type of big revelation to come out, and then you realize, nope, they're just dumb, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they got rid of a generational type talent. But my question is, how bad was it within the walls of the Nuggets to be able to make a move like this? And Michael Malone, he feels a lot like Bill Belichick, where he could walk past the owner in the hallway and just ignore him, right? Remember that when they said that in the Patriot doc? Bob Kraft was walking down the hallway and Bill Belichick would just walk past him and not even acknowledge him? That seems like something Malone is capable of. And don't call him Mike. He'll get mad at you. And you don't want that. All right, we'll keep things rolling. I appreciate your time today. When we come back, Mr. Bladholm is going to be in the studio, my good friend, and Jeff Keller, a Gold Star dad, with a terrific story. And we got a lot of different things to talk about, including the Masters, which is the ultimate week in golf, with the ultimate golf course and the best app in the history of apps, the Masters app. And if you haven't downloaded that, you need to get on that right now because the tournament's coming up in a couple of days. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing.
timeless song.
All right, Rip City Drive. Shacker, are you there? Are we good? Are we good, Shacker? All right, Rip City Drive. What's going on, my friends? I do appreciate your time. Very happy to welcome in a very good friend and a gentleman who I have great respect for. I'm talking about my man, John Bladholm and Jeff Keller. John, what's up, buddy?
Love to be here, and thanks for having us. I think it's not only the greatest television week for golfers, but the greatest week in all the sports.
You and I were talking about this on the phone the other day. The Masters app is by far the best app available to all people.
It's by far. I'm on it all the time, and it's not only the histories about it, but there's so much that goes on in and around. And, golf benefits a lot of people worldwide, and we sometimes forget that. But my favorite week in all of sports.
Have you been on the grounds at Augusta before?
I've been there, lucky enough to have been there 3 times. My most embarrassing moment in life happened at the Masters, the first time I went.
What happened?
I got invited by a client by Bayer Aspirin when we ran the CVS Charity Classic.
Yep.
And I stayed in a house that was owned by the guy that owned all the Toyota dealerships.
Mm-hmm.
And I had flown all night, stayed up, played video games with a kid that happened to sit next to me. In fact, the family tried to hand me $100 to babysit their kid all night. And I didn't drink coffee at the time. So I drank a cup of coffee, went to this house, and some things happened in the restroom, and I destroyed something. And the CEO of Bayer was coming into town, and we were waiting for him in the 4-car garage, and water started coming down the walls behind him. And so we packed up, went to the Masters, came back. They had repainted the entire garage. So, and ironically, I was walking with Peter Jacobsen at the AT&T and in a practice round, and one of the caddies goes, "Hey, did you hear about that guy who destroyed something in Augusta?" And Peter turns to me and he goes, "That's the guy right there." So that's probably what people love the story, and there's a little bit more detail I'm leaving out, but greatest place. It is like I was listening to Rory this morning, and it is the most beautiful park to him, and that's why there's a lot of history, but he goes, "There's no more beautiful place in the world than Augusta, Georgia."
I love hearing the pros, and we're talking about the best of the best, whether it's Tiger or it's Bryson or it's Rory. Guys, the respect they have for the course and the way it's set up and the history and the tradition and all the great golfers who have played the course, conquered it, or been defeated by the course, they respect it a great deal. And I love seeing that in the game.
Oh, it brings guys like Tiger and Gary Player and Jack to tears about what an honor it is to play there. I went down a rabbit hole the other night on YouTube, and they're doing all these vignettes about just different stories, whether it's it's no longer new, but, I think it's great they do the ladies amateur there, and the kids, Peter still hosts the putt, pitch, and chip, and they continue to evolve. And seeing Tiger Woods in tears talk about what an honor it is, and think about all those guys that finish second, right? That don't get to go to the dinner. That happens, I think, Tuesday night tonight, I think. I hope, because I know how much you love the game of golf, I hope someday you get to go.
Yeah, I'd love to be there. I went back recently to get ready for it, and I watched the '05 Masters with Tiger's phenomenal chip shot on 16. I went back and watched Freddie Couples' championship round where he got the jacket. And then I also went back and watched Jack's 86 surprising victory. And so you see the course, and it's the same course every year. So it's like some of the battles that the players face on the same holes, which is fascinating to me. But that's how I get myself ready, because YouTube is beautiful because they post full rounds, the final rounds. You can go back and watch and see how things played out. But the biggest collapse I saw was Greg Norman. devastating for him to be up and then have Nick Faldo lurking and take advantage of every mistake he made. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Greg Norman fan, so I was actually happy
You're
to
not the
see
only
that.
one.
I think Nick Faldo is a class act. So, yeah, it is. They do such a great job of limiting commercials during television to showcasing the whole place. I had a buddy of mine that went and caddied there for a month so he could play it one day, and he actually took his family in a motorhome and he worked his tail off to get one round of golf at Augusta. And could you imagine, that opportunity to step up there and tee it up? It's nuts. Who's your pick, by the way?
Well, I'm going to pull for Bryson because I like Bryson a lot. But my pick, if I'm not going to go with one of the favorites, would be Oberg. He's one of those guys with game. He's competed there before. I think he's got the ability, and I think he's like 20-1 odds right now. But I like Oberg's ability to possibly win the tournament.
Yeah, I think he has the 6th best odds.
Yeah.
So he's right up there. He's clutch. He's cool under pressure. I love the part of it where the young players ask, the Freddie couples to talk about where to hit it, when, and how much there are those little secrets that Tiger didn't always want to share. And then when he got older and a little bit more mature, he was sharing those thoughts with the good friends of his like Justin Thomas, who may sneak in and win this thing.
Yeah, and ball placement with each hole there is critical.
Yeah, misses are critical, right? Like good misses, which I didn't think about. You look at Jordan Spieth, hit it in the water on 12 twice, leading it, and that guy is clutch. So you think about, does pressure get to him? I mean, all the guys in the interviews are talking about it's the only place in golf you step up to the first tee and you're nervous. I mean, I would think the Ryder Cup too, but they all talk about number one at Augusta, and it hits you in the throat right away.
Yeah.
So we're going to get you there. Someone who's a member at Augusta, would you please call Chad and take him to Augusta?
I interviewed Lou Holtz once in downtown Portland. And, obviously he, like a lot of coaches, when he's in a room, even though he's smaller in stature, he commands a certain presence, respect. And as I was talking to him, I realized that he was wearing a Augusta National sweater, right? And I said, that sweater's amazing. Where'd you get that? And he goes, oh, this is what they give to all the members. I was like, okay, my bad. Coach.
That's a very cool way to say. That's a very nice way of saying you're not going.
Yeah, that's pretty much what he said. Yeah, you don't belong in this club, and I understood that.
Yeah, it is. It is just when you walk on there, it feels like carpet.
Yeah,
the grass everywhere, and the affordability in today's world. We're all talking
food,
about it. Yeah,
the pimento cheese sandwich is one of the best bargains in the history of life.
Yes, I would have brought you one back. It would have been 4 days old, but
it would have still tasted good.
I know. So anyway,
well, it's great to have you in studio, and now we get a chance to welcome in Jeff Keller, who is a Gold Star dad. He runs the USO out at PDX, among many other things that you do. But Jeff, thanks for coming back in. It's great to see you again. I love your story, but for those who don't know, maybe give a little background on what a Gold Star dad is.
Well, thanks, Chad. I appreciate being here today. Gold Star family member. It's a club that you don't want to be a part of. You never can get out of. What it means is our oldest son, Andrew, was killed in Afghanistan on August 15th of 2012. The designation happened over 75 years ago for the Gold Star family designation, and it signifies a killed in action service member. It's your focus and everything after that date was just what do we need to do to move forward, and there have been given a lot of opportunities, a lot of amazing opportunities to try to move forward and have been able to do that with a lot of great friends like John Bladholm, people that have stood by us and been there for us, not because they feel sorry for us, but because they truly love us and they're our friends.
Well, Jeff, my dad's always told me one of his biggest fears would be having to bury his own son, right? And you've gone through that experience. And so how long did it take after your son's passing before you really started to think about how you could honor him and do work to keep his memory alive? Like, how long did that process take?
I don't know if it was ever was a process that I gave any thought to. I think it was just kind of an evolutionary process. I did feel that I needed to find something to not take my mind off it, because it never leaves my mind, but something that would give me a drive and passion again to get out into the world and do something. And struggled for 3, 4, 5 years after Andrew was killed, not knowing what to do, still focused on keeping up with the Joneses, and took Andrew dying for me to figure out, it's time to slow down a little bit. It's try to make a difference in the world, because that was so important to Andrew. He always talked about making a difference. A letter he wrote his mom. I might have mentioned this story the first time I was here last year, but he wrote his mom a letter at Christmas time, right before he left for basic training. And there was a line in that letter that says, "Isn't that what life's about? Be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for that small chance of making a difference in someone's life."
Wow.
Here's a kid, never served a day in the military. We're not a military family. It's just who he was. It was part of his DNA. He wanted to make a difference. He wanted to leave a mark, not for his own self-gratification, but to truly make a difference, leave the world a better place. And we talk about it all the time, my wife and my youngest son and I. Andrew made a difference. He continues to do so today, not only through the work that I do, but, one of the things I was always afraid of is that people were going to forget my son. I didn't have to worry about that. Our city, our state, our country is making sure that nobody ever forgets Andrew. And I think that makes it a little bit easier for me then to go out and do the things that I want to do to, first of all, make my son proud, and second of all, make a difference.
Where did that character come from? His desire to be a blessing and make a difference in people's life. Who instilled that in him? Was it you or his mom? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we always laugh where we were good cop, bad cop. She was the gentle, soft, caring one, and I was, rule with the iron fist, and, you're going to get things done. But it was always a great balance. And Andrew, before he was killed, we had a conversation about that maybe at 19 or 20, right before he left for the military. But my younger son talks about it all the time, and he talks about the balance that my wife's soft and gentle side and my a little bit more crusty, curmudgeon-y side, the balance that created with the boys is really who created who they are.
Yeah, that's terrific. Now, with the USO, I just know it's at PDX, and it's a place for, well, break it down. What is the USO?
So the USO in Oregon has changed since I was in here last time. So we actually closed the USO center and the airport at PDX, and we moved our operations. We went from supporting active duty, guard, and basically we were supporting retirees traveling through the airport. We're now at the MEPS, which is the Military Entrance Processing Station. It's where all the new recruits come through. So we see every new recruit for all 5 branches of the military, including 6 with Space Force.
Is that the one that's off Columbia?
No. Well, no, it's right next to the FBI building right off Airport Way.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a facility right across the street from them, and they handle about 1,500 to 1,800 kids a month through there, and so we're getting to impact. The way I look at it and the way I talk to my team about, we were all disappointed when we closed the center at the airport.
Yeah.
But I think what we've done is we've realized that we're making a much bigger impact, because these are all our future leaders of our country. These are all 18 to 22-year-old kids raising their hand and saying, "I'm willing to die for this country." These are our next round of leaders coming through. So it's pretty cool.
All right, Jeff, there are a couple other things I know that you were involved in. I just want to know if you're still involved. Tribute to Honor, which helps local veterans, and you had the companion, I think, dog program.
We do. Tribute to Honor has kind of evolved into one of the veterans that we placed a dog with. A couple weeks before I met him, before he reached out for help, he had a 9 in his mouth and was ready to end it. He was done. Somebody got a hold of him and told him to reach out to the VA to talk to a counselor. He talked to a counselor, and how ironic it was is that counselor was actually counseling my wife, who she still sees today, 13 years after Andrew was killed. And he connected us together, and we donated our very first dog that my wife and I had trained together. We placed with him. And now he runs an incredibly successful veterans nonprofit called Canine Cavalry. And that's what he does, is he supports
awesome.
veterans and their dogs. And so we help fund and support his programs that he runs through Tribute to Honor.
That's great. What about Get Wet for a Vet?
still going strong. We just handed out in December again this year. Every year, December is our distribution point. We handed out $145,000 to 6 different charities.
And that's where you purposely play golf in crappy weather, right?
Yeah. We play in October. But we've been lucky. It's only rained twice in the last 8 years. We had one day where it was over 80 degrees in October. So,
that's better than your first Oregon Charity Championships, John.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, 2 years, that was the first, that year of the Johns tournament was also the same day as Get Wet for a Vet. So both tournaments, we got wet for a vet. I got wet for Oregon Charity Championships, but both tournaments were just soggy.
That's great. What about the honor flights?
We have the first honor flight coming up in 2 weeks. We'll be doing.
And what exactly is that?
When
you say honor flight.
So the honor flight is started about 25 years ago to take World War II veterans back to Washington, D.C., and give them an experience to go to all the monuments, all the parks, go to Arlington.
Awesome.
Witness the changing of the guard, laying of the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. They go on this amazing trip. It's 3 days. It's jam-packed. But now today, most of our World War II veterans have passed, and the very few that are remaining, in many instances, aren't healthy enough to travel on this trip.
Yeah.
Last year, we had about 5 World War II vets between the 5 or 6 different trips we did last year, 3 in the spring and 3 in the fall. But this year, so far in the spring, we don't have any World War II vets. And so then it transitioned to Korean War veterans, Vietnam War veterans, and now Cold War veterans are eligible to go on these trips. They're totally funded by donations and partnerships. The first group we have coming in a week and a half is going to be 26 veterans, total of about 60 travelers. And then the second group later on this month, we have almost 60 veterans all traveling together, a party of about 145 or 150. And it's an amazing experience. They leave in the morning, usually on a Thursday or a Friday, and come back either Saturday or Sunday. They travel all day. They get to D.C. It's a direct flight, so they actually get to D.C. and have events that first day they get there. All-day travel to museums and monuments on the second day, and then the third day is a half day. They get on an airplane, or they get on a bus and go back to the airport and jump on an airplane and fly home.
Wow, that's action-packed.
I'm exhausted when I just read the itinerary. I don't know how a 90-year-old Korean War veteran does that, but they do it. And the amazing thing is you see the little bit of anxiety and trepidation when they leave, and when they come back and walk off that walkway, coming from the airplane, they're nothing but smiles, and they're telling you it was the most amazing trip. And in many instances, they each have to have a guardian. A lot of times, the guardians are their kids or their grandkids. I had a World War II guy that was in, and his son was an Air Force colonel. He was still in after almost 25 years. His grandson was the one that took him on this trip. Amazing. So, yeah, honor flights. If anybody ever gets a chance to come out to the airport, they can track down when the airplanes are landing or coming into town back, or when they first take off. Come out and be part of the welcome home, because there's hundreds of people outside security waiting for them to come through.
That's great. That's so great you do that. I know how much D.C. and those monuments meant to my papa, because he was in World War II. And what I always remember about papa is that he saw a lot of things. He was reluctant to share a lot of stories in detail about what he saw in the war.
Yep. Yeah, I see that a lot with Vietnam veterans. And they came home to terrible, they were spit on, and they were told not to wear their uniforms in public when they came home. It's crazy how in today's world, with the men and women that raise their hand, all those guys didn't raise their hand. They were grabbed in. They were plucked off the street. They were said, you're going to go serve in the Army. You're going to go serve in the Navy. And, our kids today are raising their hands. Those guys didn't have a choice, and then we treat them like crap when they came home. And, that's been one of my missions, is to make sure that, instead of saying thank you for your service to a gentleman that wears a Vietnam veteran's hat, walk up to him and shake his hand and say, welcome home.
Welcome home.
See the look you get in his eyes.
That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
That is special. Yeah, the story that sticks out in my mind, I remember my papa telling me that he came across a German soldier who had perished in battle, and he had his personal belongings on him, but there was a picture that he had inside of his jacket of his wife and his family. And that's when my papa told me that he realized that he and that German soldier were the exact same. They were just doing what they were called to do in their duty, and that's when he started to feel great grief and realize that this guy's not an enemy. He's just doing what he was commanded to do, just like my papa,
Yep.
And he had the same fears, same things that he was worried about, and he had a family to care for. And I just found
Your
that to be
papa
striking.
probably had that picture of his family
did.
on him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very interesting. Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll come back and we'll continue to dig because we got the USO golf tournament coming up. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right, we got to get the details on that more with John Bladholm. But appreciate your time. Rip City Drive with Chad doing on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, John Bladholm and Jeff Keller in studio. Now, John, I didn't ask you. Who do you think is going to win the tournament? You asked me, but who do you like?
Well, first of all, that's why I don't follow Jeff Keller, because what he has to say is a lot more important and impactful than me talking about a little golf tournament.
I've spent the last 30 minutes with Jeff, and he's touched me in multiple ways already. It's
yeah,
incredible.
I mean, Jeff and I talk all the time, and you and I were just talking off the mic that, you know, Jeff is kind enough and thoughtful enough, and his wife Kim, that I ask him a few times a year to go back to that day, and people don't realize that it changes so many lives.
Well, it does. So let me ask you a question. Do you have, because if we have time, can I keep you past 4? Do you guys have time past 4?
I do.
Do you have time past 4? Okay, then let's get into it then. If you're okay sharing the story.
Yeah.
Because I don't know the process until you explained it, but when your son passes away in duty, how do you find out? And how did that process play out for you and your family?
Well, when a service member is killed in action, or even in a training accident or an off-base motor vehicle accident, the military has 24 hours to notify the family. If you've been injured in combat or in an accident or training, whatever, they have 48 hours to notify the family. So within the first 24 hours of Andrew being killed, we actually found out about 14 hours after he was killed. It's a knock on the door. There are no phone calls. It's a knock on the door. It's what you see in the movies or on the TV show. And there are 2 uniformed Army officers outside. One was a chaplain and one was the notification officer. I was not there. Our youngest son, Derek, he was 19 at the time Andrew was killed. He was home alone when they arrived.
And when you say youngest, you mean your 6'3", 210-pound youngest son.
Yeah, he's probably a little heavier than 210 now. He's just a new dad, so
oh, great.
Yeah, I don't think the dad bod's quite started yet.
Congratulations, Derek.
Yes, and well, what about Grandpa?
Grandpa.
Yeah.
How many grandchildren do you have? One?
We have one.
Oh,
This is
dear,
our
congrats.
first.
You're loving it, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
My dad said it's the best thing ever.
It is.
Yeah, it's great.
It is. It's amazing to find something that you can love as much as you loved your own children when they were born. It's just, it's pretty amazing.
And for those of you who are listening on radio, Jeff's eyes lit up when he first mentioned a grandson. You saw it, John. Eyes lit up.
It was almost obnoxious.
I love it.
I was showing him pictures when we first got here. So
that's good. All right, so Derek is at home alone, and you told me that your wife is out delivering a package for your son.
She was actually at the post office with a packet that was heading to Afghanistan. It was probably the 3rd pack or so that we had sent out to him from us, but he got about 10 from different family members and
like
stuff.
A care package.
Exactly. Yeah, they're I forget what the name of the IPS, I think, is the initials that the military uses for these. And the post office gives you a special rate for those packages that are going overseas.
And Jeff was at the coast, so he's not next door. He's
a 3-hour. Yeah, I get a phone call from the notification officer. It was actually on my son's phone. I thought he was calling me, and they notified me. And I was actually in Newport, so I had about a 3-hour drive.
So you got the news before the drive back.
Oh yeah, I was working.
God.
I was actually in day 2 of a 3-day or 4-day road trip for my work up and down the Oregon coast. And so I had just started day 2. It was about the middle of the day on day 2 when I got the phone call. Tried reaching out to my wife. Couldn't get in touch with her. She never answers her phone anyway.
That sounds like my mom.
Yeah, it's perfect. And so I finally was able to get in touch with her after she got home, and we talked for a few minutes. And then we were both in shock. You know, you don't know. I don't remember the drive. I do remember I smoked a whole pack of cigarettes in the car. It was my wife's car, and God, she was madder than heck when I got home. But I didn't care.
Here's the other thing he mentioned about that drive home is he was in the left lane doing probably 90 miles an hour, and a Ford truck would not get out of his way. So he's kind of flipping him off. The guy's flipping him off back, and he looks back on it and is like, man, if that guy knew why I was in the left-hand lane, he would have gotten out of the lane.
Well, and there were times, too, I'd be driving, and all of a sudden I'd come back to look at the road or come back awake, and I was off in the gravel. Just craziest drive, longest drive of my life. There's nothing you could do. It's funny. Andrew, a week before he died, he and I were Facebook messaging, and he told me, he goes, Dad, it's really getting crazy here. I just want you to know, you and Mom to know how much I love you, and if I don't make it home, how much I love you guys and how much you mean to us. And that was about a week before he died. And, we knew that it was dangerous, but there's nothing you can do to prepare yourself for that knock on the door, or that phone call, or, however you're notified that, your loved one, whether it's your spouse or your child or your brother, or, it changes your life instantly and forever.
What's amazing, though, the courage of your son and many others who willingly walk into that situation knowing what the possible outcome is, but they do it without hesitation.
Yep. Yeah, it's an admiration that I will never be able to explain. And getting now a chance to work at the MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station, now where we've moved the USO here in Oregon to, I get to talk and see those kids. The MEPS office there created this beautiful shadow box for Andrew. I mean, it's beautiful. It's got all his awards and his medals, his ribbons, a beautiful picture of him. And I get a chance to kind of share that with some of those kids that, because I'll wear a 173rd Airborne Combat Team hat in. They'll want to know, oh, did you serve in the 173rd? No. And I'll share my son's story and take him around and show him that shadow box. So I get to make an impact with these 18 to 22-year-old kids that are brave, and they're the ones that are raising their hands and saying they're willing to die for us now today.
Wow. Well, Jeff, how did you deal with the grief as a family? I mean, you and your wife, your son, so it doesn't destroy you guys.
Totally differently. This one thing I learned right away, instantaneously, is there is no right or wrong way to grieve.
Everyone does their own process.
They have to. You try to force somebody to grieve the way you want them to grieve, you're going to drive them away from you. We had family members that, thought after a year that we should be moving forward. And it's funny. It'll be 13 years in August. And there's not a day or there's not an hour that goes by that I don't want to break down and start crying because I miss my son so damn much.
Yeah.
Just, it's you can't ever prepare yourself for this. So anybody that says, oh, I know how you feel or I know what you're going through, bull.
No, yeah.
Sorry. And I almost got beeped there.
No, it's okay. But no one, your life's never going to be the same. It never.
No. Everybody else's life continues to move forward. I mean, it might slow down, especially your close family and friends. Their life slows down a little bit while you're going through what you're going. But eventually their lives continue on and you're still left behind with, this destruction. I can't think of any other way to describe it.
So what do you recommend for people that, not the people impacted directly, but like friends or family members who are on the outside? What's your recommendation for them for how they can support family members or friends going through that type of hell?
Yeah,
just let them know you're there.
It's not, hey, what do you need? What can I do for you? I'm right here knocking on your door every day.
Yeah.
It's a text. Hey, man, love you, thinking of you. Let me know what I can do.
Yeah.
It's not constantly being there. It's somebody bringing flowers or a dinner, a Chipotle dinner, and knocking on the door, handing you the food and saying, hey, I love you, and I'll talk to you soon. There is nothing anybody can do. There is absolutely nothing that anybody can do to take away the pain and the angst that you feel when you go through something like this. But there are things that people can do to let you know that there are people there to help and support you.
All right. Well, hold that thought. We got more. This is even better than what I thought I was going to be. Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. I mean, it's I got to wrap my mind around that. Jeez, you're 3 hours away and you got to drive home after you get the knowledge that your son has been killed in battle. John, can you imagine that drive? That's hell.
No, I can't believe you.
He's lucky he didn't crash. And
I can't believe you think this is better than what you thought it was going to be. It was always going to be. Jeff Keller is one of a kind human. You got to be ashamed of yourself.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
I've had a lifetime of shame. Trust me. All right, we'll keep things rolling. We'll come back more from Jeff. In fact, he's got a great story to share about John Canzano. We'll get into that. And we'll talk about the USO golf tournament here on the Rip City Drive. All right, Jeff Keller and John Bladholm in studio. I appreciate you guys taking time to hang out because I'm enjoying the conversation. I want you to share your story on John Canzano because I have a unique relationship with him where he and I worked at the same station in town a few years ago, and we worked side by side. I did the afternoons. He did the show before mine, and I've always respected him for the work that he's done. But he and I had butted heads in the past, and we were at odds on certain things. But what happened is that his brother John put on this summer camp Exceptional, where it would benefit kids with different disabilities. And my son is autistic, and Isaac participated in the camp one year and then did it multiple years after that. And Isaac loves John, and he loves his brother Ben, and the camp was wonderful for him. But when I saw John and how he dealt with my son, it made everything, all the little irritations of the past go away. And now John and I have a very good relationship. And so I was thankful for that because it's funny, as you get older, you can look back and realize, like, what was I even irritated about? Some nonsense, right? It's all BS in the long run. But, he made a difference in my son's life. And when you do that, I'm like, okay, we're cool, man. Whatever I can do for you, John. And so I will always appreciate that. But you had a similar experience. What with Canzano, what went down?
I did. Well, in 2006, I was the manager for the Murray Hill Little League baseball team that went back to the Little League World Series.
That's pretty cool, by the way.
It was awesome. It was an amazing experience. About halfway through the regionals down in San Bernardino, California, the Oregonian reached out to us and said, hey, we'd like to have a writer. If you guys win this regionals, go back to the World Series, we'd like to have a writer embedded with you guys and just tell your story on the airplane when you leave and just be part of everything. And said, great. John Canzano was asked if he wanted to do it, and he turned the job down. So Steve Dean ended up coming with us. Well, in the interim, during that summer when we were winning baseball games and moving on, John wrote an article about the evil empire of Murray Hill Little League. And there had always been jokes that we had an underground practice facility, and that's why we were always so good. Rightfully so. All you have to do is watch TV or look on YouTube videos right now and see crazy parents and coaches out there with youth sports.
Crazy.
It's insane. And
the worst part about all of that are the parents.
They are.
Yeah.
By far. So, he writes this article there, and then says, no, I'm not going to go with them. And again, I can understand why a little bit. But Steve Dean went with us. We went back and had a great experience, finished third in the world that year. I mean, we lost to Georgia in the U.S. Championship game, which was phenomenal. Came home and went about our lives. Well, my wife and I were Subway franchisees for a long time. And he came after we came home. Steve Dean and him had a chance to talk, and about a month after we got back, he came into my Subway. My wife and I owned 3 Subways at one point a few years ago, and said, I'd like to sit down and talk with you. And I said, okay. So I went down and sat and talked, and he basically apologized. He said, I was wrong. The things I wrote about Murray Hill, at least in your instance, with you as a coach, your coaches that coached with you, your families, your parents and everything, you guys are how it's supposed to be. And I just wanted to personally come in and apologize, which, blew me away because that was the last thing. He was always really quiet. He'd come into our Subway on a regular basis, but very rarely say anything. We'd acknowledge seeing each other. I mean, I knew who he was. But so that was in 2006. And then in 2012, when Andrew was killed, and we kept being bugged by the media about wanting to tell Andrew's story, instead of trying to do it 10 times or 15 times, I just decided the experience I'd had with John and the impact that he had on me when he came back, he didn't need to do what he did, come back and apologize for the articles that he'd wrote and the things that he'd said.
That took some balls to do that.
It did, and it earned my respect, by far. It still didn't Andrew. Then my oldest son, Andrew, he still didn't like Canzano because of that story and what he'd said about me and our team. But when Andrew was killed, I knew that, of all the people that I thought would tell Andrew's story fairly and honestly, given my interaction with him,
it was him.
It was him. And so I reached out to him. I had his number from the Little League days. I left him a message. He called me back the next day, and he came to our house multiple times and wrote the story. He took pictures of, Andrew's, third grade T-ball picture, and whatever. And it just was a good man. He made an impact on us, and the respect I have for him to this day.
And able to share Andrew's story the right way, right?
Yep. Yeah, he wrote an amazing article. He said it was the longest article he'd ever written for the newspaper at that point, and he did it right. He did it right.
I love stories of redemption, and because we've all been in a situation where you're wrong, and then you have a chance to reflect. You're like, you know what, I was wrong, and you got to go back and make amends.
Yep.
And I've learned that when you do that, it's amazing what type of relationship can be created from those moments, right?
Yep.
And now you and John can be friends forever now.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
A lot harder to write that apology or to apologize than write that article.
Of course.
Yeah,
to be able to walk up to another man, look him in the eye, and be like, I was wrong, man.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
And then for Jeff to forgive him and move forward.
Yeah, because you could have been like, well, bleep off,
Yeah.
Well, because every media outlet, newspaper, television station, radio wanted to interview and wanted stories, and for the first year or so, that was the only one I did. I didn't do any other. And then after that, after kind of things had settled down a little bit, I started doing a few of them. But no, it's.
They do have an underground batting cage, just so you know.
I was going to say, I mean, I got to be honest with you. If I was a young kid and they had an underground practice facility, I'm in.
Yeah, I'm moving into that neighborhood.
Yeah, I need access to that right away. All right, USO Golf Tournament. Give us some details on this. It's upcoming.
So we're going to have our 8th annual USO Golf Tournament this coming August. It'll be August 13th, which is a Wednesday. It'll be tee-off shotgun starts at 1 o'clock at Langdon Farms Golf Club down in Aurora.
Yeah.
Beautiful place. They do a wonderful job for us. John, again, and his team with Athena.
Oh, John's involved?
He is.
Oh, that's too bad.
He is, yeah. Makes my life real easy. John and I, we've worked together on this golf tournament now, I believe 4, or this might be our 5th year together working on it. And yeah, we're excited. We have a great lineup this year. We've got our Huey coming back with Vietnam Huey pilot Dan McMahon coming in to bring the Huey in. We've got a lot of great prizes, a lot of great raffle items. The biggest thing right now, we need help in a couple different areas. We need help with sponsors. People that want to get involved with the golf tournament. All the money is used to help support local active duty military members and their families through our internal programs that we run for the military, but then also special and specific programs where they have a need and they come to us, and then we're able to help fund and support those events. So.
All right, so guys, what's the best way for people to reach out and support the USO Golf Tournament?
The best way would be to go to usonorthwest.org, and you can go get involved. There's a drop-down tab on the website. So go get involved, and then you can either go to donate or volunteer or sponsor, and then it'll let you go to each one of the different events that you can participate in. We don't. It's not just the money and the help supporting our programs, but if there's a company or a group out there that wants to get involved volunteering, they can reach out to us the exact same way, and we can work with their company or their charitable group or foundation and get them involved in coming out and spend an amazing day out on the golf course with a bunch of active duty military members.
Here's
and John.
Another great thing about this tournament is you have the choice of putting your own foursome together or putting a threesome together and having a former or present military service member join your group. And it's amazing because, you're meeting a stranger who defends our freedom every day. And by the end of the day, you're best friends with this young man or woman who literally has put their life on the line. So you get to not only play golf, give back, but meet some of those from our own state, our own community, that make the ultimate, intention. So,
well, and one of the unique things about Oregon is a predominantly a National Guard and reservist state. We have very few actual active duty units within the state of Oregon. Most of our units are Guard and Reserve, and so they're your next door neighbors. They're living next to you. They're the ones that are going to go to work at Nike or going to work, for Fred Meyer. And then on the weekends and one 2 weeks a month in the summertime, they're drilling and getting ready for that call up. Oregon has had, since the War on Terror started in 2001, Oregon has had 157 KIAs, killed in action. Of those 157, over 110 of them, I believe, or 115 of them are Guard and reservists that were local Oregon residents. And so it kind of tells you the makeup of our military in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, and that's in action, right? So there's so many more. Like I helped Les Schwab do a Lions for Life golf tournament over in Central Oregon at Crosswater. But I believe it's 13 service members a day take their life through suicide. So, yeah, there are the number 159 killed in action, but there are many that come back that, are really battling life, And so that's what Jeff and the team that
is that just because they're not getting connected with the right people, or the VA's not doing the job of getting them the type of support they need? What's going on
That's
there,
part of it. I think, it's the macho, you're not going
share.
to, they don't want to show weakness. There's that fear of that. That's part of it. Another part of it, though, too, is that I've heard is that there's a lot of guys and gals that come back from combat, and they come back to America to civilian life, and there's not that adrenaline, there's not that rush, there's not that excitement, there's not that need for leadership and taking charge of things, and so a lot of them come back and just make poor decisions with fast cars and motorcycles and just make poor decisions because they're looking for that adrenaline and that rush, and the lack of support services. Now, when Andrew was killed, our CAO, Casualty Assistance Officer, was a sergeant. Well, now they're colonels and lieutenant colonels and master sergeant or senior master sergeant. The rank has gone up 3, 4, 5 times where it used to be because they're trying to figure out what's going on. Oregon hasn't had a KIA since 2014, but we've had 55 or 60 service members pass in different fashions since I started with the USO in 2017. So, and none of those have been KIAs. So,
doesn't stop.
Well, the website, as Jeff mentioned, usonorthwest.org. They've got the drop-down tab where you can just go to get started or volunteer, and you can, make your donations online. You can get involved. You can obviously be a part of the golf tournament. As John said, you can get a threesome together, and then they'll pair you with a service member and get a chance to play golf out at Langdon Farms. That's a good idea.
Yeah. The other thing that you didn't mention, because you wouldn't know this, but Jeff volunteers for all of our events. So in addition to, there should be more Jeff Kellers in this world, but he shows up in the dark, leaves in the dark, and he helps us put on what we hope is a first-class event over and over again because he knows it's helping other charities around the community. So I do love this guy.
What else is going on with Oregon Charity Championships? What's up in your world?
Thank you. It's going to be an awesome season of golf kicking off this week, as we mentioned. But the Oregon Charity Championship will be September 29th at the Oregon Golf Club. I call it the U.S. Open for charities. It's 32 different teams representing 32 different charities. We paid out 5 places last year, thanks to Pacific Office Automation and Mondelez and Safeway. And this year we're going to pay out 8 places. On Point is coming back to do the $1,000 KPs and long drive for men and women. Toyota is back for their $5,000 putt for charity, and they put up 4 hole-in-one vehicles. And then we have a kind of a special treat surprise this year that I think is going to blow all the participants away. And as most people know me, I have a pretty big mouth and can't keep a secret, but I'm going to do that. So Les Schwab, who I met with this morning, Spencer and his team, they provide 32 walking scores to keep it legit. So we'll give out about $80,000 a year this year to.
So that's how you make sure people like David Lucas don't, foot wedge it or whatever the case may be.
David Lucas, one of a kind. I don't even. Yes, but David's team has won the last 2 years. He will not win this year. I'm going on air right now. David Lucas' team will not win this year.
I want Marshall Burgess' team to win this year.
I want you to just play, okay? Yeah. The 29th, put it on your calendar. You told me you played 182 rounds last year, so let's get you committed. And
when's the date?
September 29th.
I'm in.
Okay.
I'm in.
You heard it.
I'm in.
You heard it. Thank you. You're going to host a lot of things. You have no idea what I'm in.
What you just got
You don't know what
yourself
I'm
involved
in
with.
means.
I'm going to be like Jeff Carroll. I'm going to show up in the dark and leave in the dark.
I bet you would. I bet you would. But we have it's an incredible community. It was so successful that we went to Central Oregon, and Hayden Holmes over there supports that event at an equal amount. We'll probably go to Boise next year. I know I keep talking about it, but these tournaments are more work than people think. And there's only 2 of us on our company, and then you have volunteers and friends like Jeff that come out and help out. So it's going to be a big, big year, but I think we have a really cool surprise. You can go to OregonCharityChampionship.com to take a look at it. You can register a charity, send me an email. The website is not up and running yet because we're still solidifying all of our sponsors. We have like 2 towns in Nika, IBW, and White Claw, and just a bunch of Kurt Becker, who has an outdoor billboard company. We have just a lot of cool partners on this, and it's turned into be very, very competitive. So I call it kind of community meets competition.
Yeah.
So it's I think once you play in it, you'll want to come back and defend your title the next year.
Well, what I love most about it is what David's talked about is you're getting all these charities together where they're coming together instead of constantly working against each other in the same market. They're coming together for the same cause to help each other out, which is cool.
Yeah, we were able to sit back and watch kind of a culture evolve that was very healthy for our community and people promoting each other, kind of that all ships rise together. Honestly, I wouldn't be here right now with Jeff Keller, highlighting him if we didn't reconnect and continue our friendship. So it's, you allow me to come in and bring in some special people because of the OCC. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm just proud of what we're doing, and we'd love to get it to be over $100,000 purse. So every year we're just going to keep striving to increase the charitable purse. And all that money, 100% goes to those 501c3s.
All right. There you go. If you want to check out OregonCharityChampionship.com, and if you want to get more details on the USO tournament, USONorthwest.org. John Bladholm and Jeff Keller in studio. Anything else we need to get out? Did we cover everything for today?
Well, I'll just say you come in, you make this big stink about the Denver Nuggets, which who cares? You playing in the OCC is so much more important than who the Denver Nuggets hire and fire as a coach. So thank you for committing.
Well, the good thing is you put it on a date where we're almost guaranteed to get good weather, too. I don't want to be out there with wet grips and long pants on. I want to be out there in shorts and feeling good in the warmth.
I never thought of you as a baby, but my God, are you going to play get wet for a vet? Come on now. We're Oregonians. It's liquid sunshine. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do.
No, you know how much I care about you, and it was great to see you on Sunday. And Jeff, thanks again for coming back in and sharing your story. And thank you for sharing the story about how you found out. I've never heard the story before, and for you to share it, again, I know that you've been down this path before, but it takes courage to be able to share. And I think it's awesome, even though you downplay it, that you're, carrying on your son's memory the right way and making a difference. Yeah. I mean, you're really doing what your son was doing, right? He wanted to go over and make a blessing by making a difference in the world, and you're doing the same thing now. And he would be proud of that, which is cool.
That's what I'm hoping. Yep. I appreciate you bringing me on today, and John giving me a chance to come in and share a little bit about what we do, and it's an honor.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, big thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I'll see you again soon, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Okay. All right. We'll keep things rolling. Rip City Drive, we're going to go to Denver at 5. We'll talk Masters with PGA Dave at 5:20. And when we come back, we're going to hear from Sean Hyken with the latest after Joe Cronin, a well-deserved extension. We'll get the latest details on that. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, before we get to our Trailblazer insider, Sean Highkin, I just want to give a big thanks to John Bladholm and Jeff Keller for spending time in studio, and it ended up being an even more in-depth conversation than I had envisioned, but I appreciate Jeff for sharing a story. Losing a son in battle, I can't imagine the trauma that you would experience in that type of situation, but for him to be so open and transparent and share the story, and now he's out there making a difference in the lives of people to honor his son, I think that's very commendable, very difficult, obviously, but big thanks to those gentlemen for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversations as well, and hopefully it touched you the same way that it did me. Now, I had a conversation with Sean Highkin yesterday on the show. It was also the same day as the national championship. There's a lot of stuff going on, so I want to play it for you again in case you missed it. I talked to him shortly after we got the news that Joe Cronin had signed an extension with the Trailblazers, which I think is great. I'm a fan of Joe Cronin, and I think he's doing some good work, and his story has not yet been written in Portland, but because he's got big things ahead of him. But I'm excited about what the future brings. And the first thing I asked Sean was, are you surprised that there was an announcement today before the end of the season that the Blazers and Joe Cronin had come to an agreement on an extension?
I was a little bit surprised that it happened today. I hadn't heard that it was in the works, but I knew that at some point in the next few months they were going to have to figure something out, because when they what I haven't been able to figure out yet, so they back in May of 2022, which is when he was officially given the job on a permanent basis as opposed to being the interim GM like he was for a few months before that, they signed a 4-year deal at that time. And what I haven't been able, so this coming year, 25-26, would have been the last year. What I haven't been able to figure out is whether that last year was an option year, like what Chauncey has, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later, or whether it was a straight 4 years. But either way, they were going to have to make a decision with Joe and going to kind of get his long-term future and situation figured out soon so that they could move forward with whatever else they decide to do this summer on, a variety of fronts. So, they got that done today, and now, I guess whatever happens in the off season, we know who's going to be the one making the decisions.
Well, I should have sent something yesterday. I saw Joe in passing before the game against the Spurs, and he's always in a very good mood, but he seemed to be a little extra happy yesterday. I should have known, man, something was coming down the pipe, but I'm happy for Joe. But let me ask you this, with the work that he's done, how would you grade Joe thus far through the 3 years that he's been on the job and all the various things that he's done? The franchise, as you pointed out throughout the year, has undergone massive change in a very short period of time.
Huge changes. I think there's been some. You can certainly point to some things and say there are things that he could have handled better or handled differently. Where, as he kind of grew into the job. But if you look at the really big stuff, the way that he handled the Damian Lillard trade, where he was kind of under a lot of pressure publicly to send him to Miami and nowhere else, and he kind of hung in there and didn't cave to that and ended up getting a much better deal than I think he could have gotten from any version of what they could have gotten from Miami. I think you have to, point to that. You have to point to the trade that they made this past summer that we've talked about many times for Denny Avdia, that could be seen as kind of a risk for a rebuilding team to actually give up draft capital to bring a player in, and then you look at how well that's worked out. So, there are things to point to that, he certainly has them going in a good direction. If you look at what's happened the second half of the season, now, there are times throughout his tenure, I'm not going to pretend it's been perfect. You look at, his first trade deadline, that trade for Norm Powell and that Norm Powell-Robert Covington trade where they didn't really get too much back. I think the objective of that deal was to just get that money off the books at any cost, because he had inherited such a messy cap sheet from Neil O'Shea. But, you look back in retrospect at that deal and, it doesn't seem like they got a lot back there. And then I think the other thing that, if you want to point to, an area where maybe he didn't handle something as well as he could have, I think he went way too hard publicly, after the 23 trade deadline and after the 23 season about how they were going to push all their chips in to rebuild around, to put talent around Damian Lillard. And he was so public about that when it didn't end up happening that way, or there weren't any deals that he liked that would have accomplished that goal, that doesn't make him look very good when he was so public about that being the goal. And I think he kind of learned from that as, like, don't tip your hand that strongly and make these big promises that you can't keep. So I think ever since Dame actually requested a trade, basically the job that he's done after Dame requested a trade and the job that he maybe did before Dame requested a trade are kind of two different jobs. And the latter one is the one that matters the most. And I think on that front, he's largely done very well, at least in my view.
Well, I think that's a great assessment, and I agree. But like Coach Billups, Joe Cronin's been learning on the job, and I just thought when he made those statements about, going all in on building around Dame was, that's a young GM who, with time will learn what to say, what not to say. And so I think you learn in those moments, and he certainly has. And I think he's gotten a lot better in terms of interviews and dealing with the media and the way he presents himself. I've been impressed with that growth that he's had there, and so that's been pretty nice. I guess the way I look at it is, Sean, and I want your thoughts, is where, I think the work overall that he's done so far has been, really good, and I like the young talent that he's amassed. But the way I look at it is that, his story hasn't been told yet, meaning, he's still got, the upcoming draft. Where do they land in the lottery and what player they're able to acquire there? But most importantly, the veteran players that he's taken back, guys like DeAndre Ayton, Matisse Thybulle, Robert Williams, and then you have Jeremy Grant and you've got Anthony Simons. What he's able to get in return for those veterans, I think, will be a big part of his story and legacy and what he's been able to accomplish here in Portland. How do you see it?
No, there's a lot of work, I think, that still has to be done in the offseason as far as what the roster looks like with, a lot of those guys that you named. Out of those guys, I think DeAndre Ayton is probably the one that's most likely to be, I don't know about, beyond next season, but the guy that I think is most likely to, have a real case to stick around this season or this coming season. But, they have to figure something out with the Jeremy Grant thing and the Anthony Simons thing at the minimum. It's, with how much, how much better Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson have gotten. I think they have enough to feel like that's the backcourt of the future. And then, with Toumani Camara, Denny Avdia as the forwards, those Grant and Simons, I think, are the two that you have to figure something out with. So we'll see what he's able to do on that front this summer. There's definitely still some decisions that have to be made. But if you look at where they were, and we've talked about this many times also, if you look at where they were a year ago, and what there was to point to for the organization to be happy about versus what there is now, I don't think there really was a lot to be optimistic about a year ago. And now I feel like there's quite a lot to be optimistic about.
I agree. We're talking with Sean Highkin, our Trailblazer insider from Rose Garden Report. I learned a truth yesterday, and I know it was mentioned in the press release today, but I didn't know this until yesterday. I was talking with a couple of people, but I love Joe Cronin's story. He's a self-made man, meaning he was an intern with the Trailblazers back in 2006, and it was one of those deals where he wanted to get into basketball. This is back where it reminds me of my old days of radio where you're not making any money as an intern, so you're charging up credit cards, for your living expenses because you're trying to get the experience necessary to latch on and get a job, and yet he found a way to do it, and now he's leading the team and just got a multi-year extension to be with the Trailblazers into the foreseeable future. I love success stories like that. That's pretty remarkable to go from intern to GM.
Well, whenever you're in that position, you kind of have to make yourself valuable. He started out as an intern under Kevin Pritchard. That's how far back it went. He joined, around the Roy Aldridge draft, and then he was there for the Greg Oden draft and all that stuff. And as they kind of went through all these different front office regime changes, you go from Kevin Pritchard to Rich Cho, and then there was that weird year period after they fire Rich Cho and they basically don't have a GM for a year, and Chad Buchanan is doing it on an interim basis, and then they hire Neil Olshey. He kind of just stuck around as this is a nice guy that people like working with, so they're not going to get rid of him when a new regime comes in. And he also really knows the salary cap really. I think the two things that he, in those early days built his reputation on were really knowing the salary cap and the ins and outs of the CBA, and then also, some of the scouting stuff that, we're seeing kind of come to fruition now. But, you kind of, you kind of stick around as, we like this guy from the last regime. We want to keep him around, and he knows his stuff as far as those couple of things. And then it got to this point where in 2021, when they had the investigation with Neil Olshey as far as the workplace conduct stuff, Joe kind of got that job by default because he's the only guy. The other two assistant GMs, Bill Branch and Steve Rosenberry, were guys that Neil brought in. And so when they fired Neil after that investigation, they kind of wanted to clean house of everybody that was associated with Neil or that was, Neil's guys. And Joe, just kind of by virtue of being the guy that had been there before Neil and wasn't somebody that Neil had brought in or that was like attached to Neil, just kind of by default, he ended up with the job. And it was very much a prove it thing. He got the job on an interim basis. And then, that trade deadline, they did, the C.J. McCollum trade, the Norm Powell and Robert Covington trade. And, he kind of got a free pass to, tank and take a step back because Dame had undergone that core muscle surgery. And, at that point around the draft lottery, they just, the organization just kind of decided, hey, this guy has articulated a vision to us as far as, what he wants to do long term, how he wants to build this, and we like this. And so they gave him the job permanently. And now I guess here we are.
That's terrific. All right. I want to talk about Chauncey Billups. Here's what I'm wondering about Chauncey. With the way that he has continued to develop and grow, and we've seen the improvements with the team this year, especially in the second half of the season, and with the growth and development of the young players, has he at least put pressure on the front office to where they have to stop and reconsider about their future and what they're going to do at head coach?
I don't think it's off the table, and I think at the very least, Chauncey's earned the right to sit down and have a conversation with them about, do we want to move forward together? Do we not want to? And maybe they still decide they don't. You and I have been talking about this on the air for like a full year at this point, where we've all just kind of been operating as though, they haven't picked up Chauncey's team option for next year. I checked on that again this morning and was told nothing has changed on that front as of right now. Okay. So they still, as of right now, his contract is still set to expire in a week after the season is over. So I had just kind of been under the assumption until something changed on that front that they were going to finish out this season and then just, mutually agree to part ways and go in another direction. And for the first half of this season, it just felt like, yeah, that's definitely where that's trending because they were as bad as everybody kind of expected them to be. And then, I don't know, once that turnaround happened in the second half of the season where they started winning a bunch and started actually making a push for the play-in, I don't know. I honestly would not be surprised either way whether Chauncey is back next year or not back next year at this point. I think there's real arguments to make on both sides. If you want to make the argument that, Chauncey has grown into the job and, he's done a great job with this group in the second half of the season, and they've, and players are still bought into him, and he's earned the right to, see this through now that they seem like they're kind of poised to take the next step. I think that's a real argument that you can make. If you want to make the argument that, Chauncey is a point A to point B coach, and it's probably better, for at this point for all sides to move on, and you probably need to hire a new coach to, really take things to the next level, as we kind of saw in Detroit and we saw in Cleveland, and we've seen kind of, Houston a couple of years ago when they hired Udoka. You can make that argument too. I think there's a fair argument to make on both sides. So it's certainly something that they're going to talk about. I mean, whether they want to bring Chauncey back, honestly, whether Chauncey wants to come back, because I think he's going to have options this summer as far as, other coaching openings. If, it's not like, I don't know if he's desperate to come back and would be willing to take a bad deal to come back, or just come back on just that option year and run this back for another year. So I don't know. I mean, it's more of an open question than maybe it was even a month ago. So, I'll be interested to see the way it goes in the next week or two.
Yeah, well, just based on what I know by standard operating procedure in sport, I think it's unlikely he would come back as a lame duck coach on just picking up the option. So if they're going to bring him back, my guess is it would have to be on a multi-year extension. And so that's what I'm curious to see how that plays out. But, Sean, I've already figured this out for you and I. You just got finished writing a piece that was, many words about all the different times you were wrong about the Portland Trailblazers, right? and I've been wrong about the Trailblazers too. So I think you and I need to pull a little George Costanza here and realize that if our every instinct is wrong, then the opposite would have to be true. So therefore, based on that logic, I'm going to have to assume Chauncey Billups is coming back, because if I just go opposition theory, I'm probably going to be in a good spot. How does that sound?
I don't think it's off the table. So.
But, well, the thing is, too, that's interesting is, how much interest does Chauncey have around the league, right? I mean, have you heard of any, does Phoenix have interest? Is there somewhere else that, maybe the Pelicans or is there other teams that have interest in a coach like Chauncey?
Phoenix is the one that I think would be, if the Blazers and him do decide to move on from each other, I think Phoenix is really the one to circle, because, we know he has, long-standing relationships with both Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and there was, I think, I don't know, I haven't been able to get a straight answer on the level of mutual interest, but I think there was at least some level of mutual interest last year around, April, May, when there was kind of some uncertainty going on with, after the Suns fired Frank Vogel, and, Joe and Chauncey kind of said different things about what at their exit interviews about what their hope for the season was. And so I think if Chauncey were to hit the market, I think that's the job that would, I would say would be the smart money would be on him, having a strong chance at landing. But again, as of right now, that job's not open. Everybody kind of thinks they're going to fire Mike Budenholzer at the end of the season, but we've thought so many things over the year. So I don't know. But I do know that Chauncey has a lot of fans around the NBA, and has a lot of well liked around the NBA, and especially the job that he's done in the last second half of this season. I think teams, and other organizations and the rest of the NBA are looking at that, and if he were to be on the market, I think there would be some interest from teams in maybe saying, hey, this guy, let's give him another shot.
No question about it. Have you heard, do you have any insight? Is Burke Cold pleased with the work of Chauncey Billups?
Seems like everybody. I mean, Burke's the one that's got to sign off on, a lot of things. He's got to sign off. I mean, he had to sign off on this extension for Joe, and, he's going to have to sign off on whatever. I haven't heard that he's not, but I also don't know Bird at all. I've met him twice, so I don't really have any insight into that.
Okay, one final question for you before you take off, Sean. What'd you make of that Duke meltdown against Houston? How crazy was that? 11-1 run down the stretch. They outscored them 28-11 in the final 11:54. Duke had one field goal in the final 10:30 of the game, and they didn't have a rebound in the final 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough way for Cooper Flagg to go out.
Gosh, crazy. Yeah, but there's no question after watching him, his size, his skill level, he's going to be a dynamo in the NBA, man. I can't wait. He's awesome. He's awesome, Sean.
And these guys are going to have probably, a 4.5% chance at this point?
It looks like, don't you think they're probably going to stay locked in at the 9 spot, so they'll have a 4.5% chance at Flagg?
Because San Antonio was a team that they were competing with for that 9 versus 8, and beating them last night, I think at this point, it's pretty much locked in.
Do you think we'll see Denny Avdia again this year?
Probably not. I mean, I was a little surprised that Tumani played yesterday, but
me too. Me too. But I thought he played great.
I think with Tumani, he's pushing for that all defense votes. I think he wants to really just leave a strong impression to close out the season. Not that these last 2 or 3 games should really matter much or swing anybody's vote, but it's a little bit easier to make that case when you aren't being shut down for the season with an injury. And he looked pretty good yesterday.
All right, coming up here at 5 o'clock, we're going to talk with Brandon Cristal, who is in Denver, and he's been covering the Nuggets story with the firing of their head coach, Michael Malone. And I really want to find out the details. A couple of things. One, was Coach Malone losing the locker room? And that's a big question I have. That's one definite possibility. How much tension was there between Coach Malone and his GM, Calvin Booth, who is not returning? He, too, is out. So was it the tension there? And then what role did ownership have in this decision? What did they see? What was going on? And how much frustration was there from the players that led to this type of decision right before the playoffs are to begin this weekend? It's not too often. In fact, I think this ties the dismissal of Hubie Brown for the latest in-season coaching fire in NBA history. And he won a championship 2 years ago. And, oh, by the way, he's the winningest coach in Nuggets history with regular season wins and postseason wins. But I also know that Michael Malone is a very intense dude, a no-nonsense type of guy. Like, he would probably wear on you over the course of time. And there are coaches, Larry Bird being one, who will believe that after a certain period of time, the same voice from the same coach, it loses its luster. So I'm going to try and get to the bottom of that. Fascinating decision. The cool part in the chaos is that David Adelman, son of Rick Adelman, will get a chance to be the head coach. He's going to be the interim. He'll take over. And from my understanding, he'll have a chance to earn the job. And part of the reason why you make the move now is so you can get a longer look at, David Adelman before you have to make a decision on whether you're going to go full coaching search or what the deal may be. So very, very interesting. But now winning a championship in the NBA does not guarantee you a long time as head coach. You can win a title and be gone in a couple of years. And the Nuggets have done this before. I think wasn't it George Karl who won Coach of the Year and then was not brought back? There you have it. But Michael Malone, he'll go right to the top of the list of available candidates, along with Taylor Jenkins. And what about Chauncey Billups and his future with Portland? So we're going to go to Denver coming up next, and then we'll talk Masters with PGA David Coleman at 5:20. I appreciate your time, my friends. 3 more Trailblazer games to go. Tomorrow in Utah against the Jazz, tip at 6. 7 o'clock tip Friday night against the Warriors. And the finale Sunday at 12:30. Tickets available. Just go to trailblazers.com. And Sunday is going to be Fan Appreciation Day. The first 7,777 fans will get the last of the 4 commemorative glasses they've handed out this year. And they're all epic. And this is going to be a Rip City Runs Deep glass. I'm a big fan. They took the Dairy Queen glasses and upped their game. These are solid, legit glasses. All right, Brandon Cristal, latest on Coach Malone being fired by the Nuggets today, coming up next.
It's time for the Rip City Drive, brought to you by Goldberg Jones. Divorce for Men, 1-800-DIVORCE. Featuring the crazy and often irrational longtime Portland radio vet, Chad Dewing.
Now a 2-0 pitch. Ohtani swings, hammers it deep to right. This one's heading back to the wall. It is gone, a home run.
Uzan on the right-hand wing, stops with 7 seconds, gives it to Cryer, 6 seconds to go, 5 seconds to Sharp, top of the key, lost the dribble, he's got to pick it up, it's scooped up by Condon, Condon secures it, and Florida found a way from 12 down to the school's third national championship in men's basketball. 65-63 the final. The Florida Gators are the national champions once again.
It was known within the league that there was a possibility that the Nuggets would move on from Calvin Booth, despite him helping construct a championship team.
This is stunning because we're just days away from the end of the regular season, days away from the start of the NBA playoffs. This is tied with Hubie Brown in 1980-81 season for the deepest into a regular season we've seen a coach get fired.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Dewing starts now.
All right, before we head to Denver for our next guest, I want to play this clip again. This is Michael Malone, and this is following the game here in Portland a few weeks ago. It's not too often where you're going to hear a coach call out players for not watching film, but take a listen.
I think each guy's got to look themselves in the mirror and start coming to each respective game with the proper mindset and have some pride. I didn't think we played with any pride tonight.
How do you feel like they took that?
I don't really care. It's not my job to evaluate how they take things. My job is to be honest, and sometimes brutally honest. And tonight, it was a brutally honest message. And the guys that are full of shit won't hear it. You know, they'll say, Coach is tripping. And the guys that maybe do really care will, because they're not going to go back and watch their minutes, because nobody watches their minutes. Nobody watches film. So we'll have to show them the film. And I said, if somebody disagrees with me, please speak up. And nobody said a word. So, again, I'm not really concerned with how they took that message. My thing is being honest with how we just played. Just got blown out in L.A. Come here against a team that is down 3, 4, 5 starters, and you mess around with the game. That's what happens, and that's exactly what happened tonight. And the same thing that's been bothering us of late that I talked about pregame, the turnovers, the rebounding, was even worse tonight. And I didn't think it could get any worse, but it did.
Well, that's just an incredible soundbite from Michael Malone. The Nuggets just less than a week away from the postseason now. No GM, and they have an interim head coach. And joining us now is my good friend, Brandon Cristal, who is with Guerrilla Sports and a correspondent for Fox Sports Radio. Now, I know what the reaction was to people outside of Denver. We were stunned. Were you shocked at the news today, Brandon?
I think I was shocked, Chad, at the timing, only because, as you pointed out, this hadn't happened since Huey Brown in 1981. And so for the Nuggets to pull the trigger on both these moves, which you thought were possible, especially if they somehow find their way in the play-in, somehow get bounced from that, or lose in the first round, perhaps even the second round, just that Michael Malone's job could be in jeopardy, even though he has 2 more years left on a very high-paying contract. And Calvin Booth hasn't necessarily assembled the best squad around Nikola Jokic last season coming off the championship or this season. And so that both these moves seemed possible, not necessarily even probable, but to pull the trigger with just 3 games left in the regular season, let's assume they don't make or have to play in the play-in and are one of the top 6 seeds, because they could finish as high as 3 depending on what happens in these final 3 or 4 games. 3 for them. I know Lakers, I think, still have 4 counting tonight. And so to make this move now is certainly a head-scratcher. Then if you take the time to listen to what Josh Kroenke said when he talked to Vic Lombardi from Altitude TV, and the Nuggets put that out, that they were going to make this move at the end of the year. They felt they were going to move on from both the coach and GM, and the GM can't really do anything right now anyway. So if you're going to rip the Band-Aid off, and you thought, as Josh said in that video, that you could get more out of this group, and maybe you can, that now is the time to do it. And so David Adelman's going to come in as the interim head coach. Obviously, people are quite familiar with David's dad and what Rick Adelman was able to do all that time in Portland. I bet if we looked at it, David might have even been born in Portland, just doing the math real quick. So he's going to be the interim head coach. They've been, saying for years that he will be a head coach. Michael Malone's kind of leading that charge, if you will. And so he's going to get a chance to show it through 3 games. He was born in Salem, Oregon, through 3 games. And then we'll see what they do in the playoffs to at least, make his case. So, timing's extremely peculiar, but the move itself happening, and I know it's kind of a long answer, but, moving on from Malone and the message clearly not getting through to his team is something that is obvious, I guess, to Josh Kroenke, to Stan Kroenke, and they just felt like today was the right day to make this move before they play the Kings tomorrow night in Sacramento.
Hey, Brandon, do you think Michael Malone was losing the locker room?
Well, I'm not sure that he ever really had it, if that makes sense. There's been plenty of rumblings from multiple people very close to, throughout the team that I trust, that because of how he handles Jamal Murray, that already doesn't sit well with every one of his teammates. He and Nikola Jokic have a great relationship. That's Malone's the only coach that Joker knows. Same with Jamal, who came in a year later. But for a guy that's making max money, that Jamal Murray doesn't play like a guy who makes max money every night. And so if you're going to still treat that guy differently, and then the Russell Westbrook dynamic and just trying to figure all of that out, and what are you getting from Michael Porter Jr. and what are you getting from Aaron Gordon, is it all getting through to the team or some of the young players? Is Peyton Watson hearing it? Is Julian Strouder hearing it? I'm not saying they're not. I'm just throwing it out there. Look, their defense has been atrocious at times. They're the worst first quarter defense in the league. I think they're the second worst first quarter defense, worst first half defense. But then throughout most of the year, they were 5th or 6th in terms of second half defense. So they could turn it on when they needed to at times, but they certainly haven't of late. You drop 4 in a row and you say, okay, is his message getting through? Clearly it's not. One other thing I'll let you know, Chad, and I don't know the last time this happened, but it's been a long, long time. Stan Kroenke on the game against the Lakers a few Fridays ago, it was a game where Austin Reeves looked like the best player in the history of the Lakers, at least in the first half, where he had 22. He had 22 and 10, and finished with, I think, 30, 35 or whatever. They eked out a 106-103 win, but the Nuggets might have had their entire starting lineup for just the 13th time all year, 23rd time. Like, they haven't had their starting 5 because of the injuries to Aaron Gordon and then the nagging stuff with MPJ and Joker having to miss a few games, and then now Jamal for a second stretch missing games. But Stan Kroenke sat at the end of the bench, which is something that I don't think he nor Josh have done in forever. There's been times where they used to kind of sit behind the bench, and certainly on the road at times they might, but we certainly haven't seen that. And there's Josh is the one that runs the day-to-day, but he's not going to make a move like this, obviously, without talking to his dad plenty. That maybe Stan saw something, too, that as Josh was probably working towards this anyway, and if they hadn't even gotten there yet, that maybe Stan saw that Malone's message clearly wasn't getting through to his players. And so I think that might have factored in, and I'm going to do some digging here in the next couple of days to see if that did at all. But, yeah, it feels like although David Adelman's message might be similar, his approach may be different. I mean, he and Michael Malone, both sons of longtime coaches, but, not necessarily the exact same personality. And so I think that can he resonate with these guys? Maybe, and if they make some sort of deep run, then maybe it's a one-man search. We don't have the Rooney Rule in the NBA as best I know, and it wouldn't be called that. And obviously the NBA is much more diverse in terms of coaching and management diversity compared to the NFL or really any other league. And so if David Adelman goes on a super deep run, then maybe he gets the job outright if they get to the conference finals or somehow the NBA finals, because they still have the best player on the planet. And I think better pieces around him. And that's why when you hear Josh Kroenke say, I think we can get more out of this group, which is what he said in that short interview today, I think he might be right. I mean, I sort of thought that. I spent most of the year, whenever they lose, kind of trying to calm Nuggets fans down. And we'll see if I'm proven right or if I've been wrong and the roster construction truly is an issue.
Well, what's interesting, Brandon, is that we follow and have David Adelman closely. And, because we love his father, arguably the best coach in franchise history. So it sounds like David Adelman's got a legitimate chance to maybe earn his way to the job. I think a lot of people who don't know Adelman or his story or the chops that he's got just see him as a placeholder. But I mean, the way you make it sound is that if he's able to, piece together the rest of the regular season and make a good showing in the postseason, that David Adelman's got a chance to land a gig.
Yeah, I think if he can prove that the players will listen to him, that they'll respond, and we know they do exit interviews at the end of the year, if to a man they really like the way David Adelman comes across, and I say to a man, it really starts with Joker. And so if Nikola Jokic can say that David Adelman will give them as good a chance as any other coach out there, and we know that certainly coaches will be interested in this, but not sure how many coaches will necessarily truly be available, but that it would be silly to think that coaches don't want the chance to coach Nikola Jokic in his prime with 3 years left on his current contract. And, Josh did say at the end of the video they're going to do a full search for coach and GM. The first GM name that comes to mind for me is Bob Myers in terms of best GMs available
no question.
under contract.
And he's known as a relationship guy. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Everyone loves him.
Yeah, everybody likes Bob Myers. He's clearly built championship teams. He was part of helping convince Kevin Durant to come to Golden State. Could trade for Kevin Durant be in the works and the Nuggets move on from a couple of pieces? Potentially. I mean, you're probably going to have to, I don't say overpay, but you can't just say, hey, we want to trade Jamal Murray and MPJ for Kevin Durant and, one other piece to make the money work. It's going to take some doing, I think. But KD will try to probably direct where he wants to go, and playing with Joker and for a Bob Myers-led organization would be interesting. But I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get talked to for both jobs. And I think how can you not say that a team that could be the third best record-wise in the league with a three-time MVP who's having the best season of his career, even if he doesn't get the hardware this year, and playing the best of anybody in the league, how is that not attractive? Obviously it's attractive. And a name that's going to come up, and it certainly did today when we did our reaction emergency podcast, and then the clips out there on our social channels on Gorilla Sports and at BK Denver Sports. I threw Chauncey Billups' name out there because we know the Denver native would love to come home. He's proven he can get guys to play hard for him because the Blazers have obviously beaten the Nuggets a couple of times and played hard here when they were really undermanned in those two games back-to-back right before the All-Star break. I know the team has an option on Chauncey's contract. Would Joe Cronin let him out of it or not pick it up, or maybe look for some sort of minor compensation? I don't know. And I don't know if Chauncey's the name at the top of the list. Obviously, David Adelman will have something to say about that in the coming weeks. But he's certainly a name that will get plenty of run around here for obvious reasons.
I mean, he is beloved there, and I'm a big fan of Chauncey, and he's done tremendous work, especially in the second half of the season and the development of the young guys. But I want to ask you about the roster construction. I mean, isn't some of this on the roster construction? Because when you're paying four guys a ton of money, and then all of a sudden you don't have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and you don't have Jeff Green and some of the key guys off the bench. That's why it's so hard when you're paying a few guys big dollars to be able to have the roster necessary to compete for a championship, isn't it?
Yeah, unless your young guys really do develop. And Peyton Watson has shown flashes, especially defensively. Christian Brown, in some ways, has made you forget about KCP. But for as hard as CB plays, and no one ever questions his effort or his effectiveness, and he certainly contributed more on offense this year consistently than KCP did in any of his time here. KCP, I think, in a lot of ways, was the heart and soul of the way they play defense. And also having a healthy Aaron Gordon changes the way they play defense. They don't get eaten up in the paint as much. Joker doesn't have to help out across the board, because I think some of their defensive metrics are skewed because Joker knows where everything is going to happen, right? Not just on offense, but certainly on defense. And the fact that he then has to get out of position. They're the worst paint defense in the league, and their defense at the rim is pretty atrocious. But it was certainly more a Josh Kroenke, Stan Kroenke call to give Michael Porter Jr. his version of a max deal, and they gave him that 4 years, 180 that could go up to 230, whatever that number was.
Yeah.
That was on them. And MPJ has had his injury struggles, which is part of the reason he ended up being a Nugget in the first place.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know what his high school career was, and the idea that he was going to be one and done at Missouri and probably be the number one pick all made sense till his body started to fail him. So the fact that he's played so many games the last 2 years is impressive. They just gave Aaron Gordon a new 4-year deal. Not crazy money, but certainly big money. And then obviously, as I mentioned off the top, the Jamal Murray max deal at $208 million for a guy that does come to play in the spring, especially in the playoffs, healthy or otherwise. So it's hard to think that a hamstring is going to keep him out unless it's so bad that he doesn't want to play. But then beyond that, they drafted a kid that they traded up for from Dayton and Deron Holmes II that they were hoping to get something out of, and he tears his Achilles in the first Summer League game. But you need Peyton Watson to continue to take a step. Julian Strother, who he took in the first round a couple of years ago out of Gonzaga. You need Strother to turn into a fully formed player, not just a three-point shooter and a solid scorer. And so they can't make a lot of moves. They don't have a lot of flexibility, but in the NBA, you can get some stuff done. They're approaching the second apron. They're just shy of it. But if I'm Josh, I'm saying Kroenke, I'm saying to myself, we've got all the money we're ever going to need, although we know that they like more of it. Why wouldn't you go into that second or even third apron like the Warriors did to get Nikola Jokic another championship or two? Because that's the one thing you can't buy, no matter how rich you are. You cannot buy a championship ring in a given sport, really, certainly one that's not fixed. And so why wouldn't you figure out all the moves you can make? They did catch a break, though. Russell Westbrook is likely going to do something stupid in the playoffs that'll cost him a game, like we've seen.
It's guaranteed. Yeah.
Yeah, but he also certainly makes plays to help you win games. But they got him for $2 million because he made $365 million in his career, $363, I guess, before this year. And he wanted to come play with Joker, and Joker wanted him to run the second unit. The problem is they've been so banged up, they just had to play way more minutes and had to start more games. And so will Russ be back? I guess it depends on how he connects with the new coach, and also, does he want to be back? I think that he still wants to play with Joker. And does he do anything catastrophic in the playoffs that costs him a series, not just a game? That, I think, would factor into it. But you can at least maybe get Russ back next year around the same deal. You know, they missed on Dario Saric, though. And they could have, like I mentioned, go into those next aprons if they would have brought KCP back because he was already on their roster, or given Bruce Brown more money. They weren't going to bring Jeff Green back anyway, but although they probably could have. And they chose to move on and get younger because Calvin Booth said they want to win championships over multiple years, not just repeat. But in order for them to do that, they're going to just need to get more from those guys. And they probably do need to move on from Michael Porter Jr., even though when he's really good, he's really good. He's just not really good consistently.
All right, Brandon Cristal is with Guerrilla Sports and a correspondent for Fox Sports Radio. Well, Brandon, I appreciate you sharing the insight and give us some detail on the background stuff there with Denver. It's going to be fascinating to see how things play out with Coach Adelman in the postseason.
Yeah, we'll see how they bounce. You know, teams usually have some sort of bounce in the first game, especially we see it in the NFL when a coaching changes. Maybe those are usually bad teams. Yeah. You never see NFL teams fire coaches right before the playoffs or GMs. And you don't normally see it in the NBA, but you saw it with Taylor Jenkins a couple of weeks ago. He's a name that we got to keep an eye on because of, you know, the kind of European-style approach to offense. Yeah. And I'm sure there's other names out there that, you know, we're not even thinking about, not to mention coaches that might be in Europe that might have a shot or a connection to Joker. Because if you watch that document, The Run to Gold on Netflix, you saw he certainly connected with the Serbian coach. They're not going to bring over a 70-year-old or 72-year-old Serbian coach. But the idea is Joker can win with coaches other than Michael Malone because he is the best player in the world. You could go player coach, Bill Russell style. But I doubt they go that route either. If anyone can pull it off, though, it'd be Joker. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And certainly we'll keep an eye on Chauncey's name to see how much of a factor he becomes. You know, if he just got in touch with Josh Kroenke, and we know he can, and obviously he's trying to coach his last few games, but Chauncey doesn't need his agent necessarily. He could probably just reach out to Josh directly, and they could maybe get it done. So who knows? But I certainly like what Chauncey's been able to get from the young guys there, and I know Blazers fans do too.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, dude, you're the man. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Of course. I'll talk to you here soon.
All right, there you go. Brandon Cristal, Guerrilla Sports, and correspondent for Fox Sports Radio here on the Rip City Drive, breaking it down. We'll come back, and when we do, we're going to touch on the Masters with our PGA pro, David Coleman. PGA Dave is coming up next. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad Doing. Well, hello, friends. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. The best week in golf, the Masters at Augusta National. Joining us now is our PGA pro, Mr. David Coleman. PGA Dave is back. What's up, brother?
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me back on, man. Excited for the Masters, and it's going to be a great tournament this week. I think with the softer conditions, it's going to really bring a lot of guys into play, and it's going to be a fun week.
No question about it. You mentioned the softer conditions. What are you anticipating with the course play from Thursday to Sunday?
I think it's going to be a little cooler temperatures. There's talk of some rain, too, I think, I want to say towards the end of the week, like Friday or Saturday. So, yeah, I think with that, I think it's going to bunch things up a little bit more. I think it's going to allow guys to go at the flags a little bit more. The greens are going to be a little slower, even though they have that great sub-air system underneath the greens that can really suck up the moisture. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a fun Masters. And usually when that happens, I think a lot of guys have a chance, and that's good for the tournament.
Yeah, no question about it. Any significant changes to the course this year to note?
I mean, I think the biggest thing was just coming out of that hurricane they had, in the fall. And there were some trees that came down, Chad, because of that. But, obviously in typical Augusta National fashion, I think it's something that we won't even really notice. And it just shows how remarkable they've been. And I know they've been part of donating and stuff to, the relief funds and everything down there in the South. So, it's it's a very good thing that obviously a negative thing that happened was a very good thing that Augusta could really help out in a tough situation, because many areas down there are still suffering because of that hurricane.
For someone that is as good as golf as you are, what do you enjoy most about the Masters?
I think probably just seeing how these guys go really attack this course at times, and then how on the certain holes then they got to play really conservative. There's such a unique strategy on this course, Chad, because there's some holes you can be really bold and aggressive, and then there's some holes where you can really see these guys are really in deep thoughts with their caddy, and then even watching the pregame show today on the Golf Channel, when they're at the range, you can see they're working with their coach, their caddy is right there, and Augusta limits the number of people who are on the range with them on a regular tour event. So you could see that they have limited access to certain guys there. They obviously don't have the number of equipment trailers there like you'd see at a regular tour event. So it's very unique how it's set up, and that's what's cool about the tournament too. So it gives a unique flavor to it, and it's just such an interesting week. Because the other thing too, there's no cell phones allowed there on the grounds, especially for the patrons, and so it's totally different than what we're used to in the real world now.
We're talking with PGA David Coleman, getting ready for the Masters this week. You're right. It's a unique setup and a wonderful course. What do you think is the number one skill that you must possess to be able to get a green jacket?
I think you got to be an unbelievable putter and great around the greens. I think that's, you look at the guys who've won there over the years, the weeks that, they've won, they've been unbelievable around the greens, and they've been able to hold some big putts. And, you've got to be able to scramble well, because you're going to miss some greens, but you got to know where to place the ball. And obviously you can't have a big miss, even though it's pretty wide there. If you have misses around the greens where, you miss it in the wrong spot above the hole, or you have a big sidewinder type putt, it could be a real challenge, to score out there. So, yeah, I think the short game is so vital at Augusta. If you don't have a good short game that week, it's pretty hard to see yourself winning there, because, there's going to be times where you're going to hit shots. And the one thing these guys, too, are going to be really cognizant of this week, Chad, is, being soft there. If they put too much spin on the ball, with a wedge or a short iron, you could, number 9 is a great example of that. You've got to really control your distance and your spin well this week.
I'm sure you've imagined this before, like I have. What hole would you like to play the most at Augusta?
I would say, the biggest thing probably would be 12. 12 is such a cool hole because, it's a hole that, there's a lot of things that have happened on that hole. It's a short hole. It's only 150 yards or so, but we've seen guys, really make messes of that hole. But then we've seen some heroic shots on 12, and then we've seen some great things, that have gone on, on 12, like Freddie Couples back in the day. That ball should have gone in the water there, and it stays up on the bank. He makes a great recovery, and, that's really all you could say. It's incredible how, that ball stayed out of the water in 92. So it's such a unique little hole, and we hear all this talk too, Chad, about how holes nowadays courses have to be longer, and the ball, all this possible change with the golf ball. But here's a little par 3 that really could, be so diabolical. Ask Rocco Mediate, ask Peter Hansen, ask some of these guys over the years who really struggled on that hole. Spieth, in 2016 when he did the yeah. So there's so many different guys on this little hole that have made a mess of it, and for those guys at the tour level, it's no more than probably a 9-iron. But it's a hole that they're thinking about all day, and you get down in that valley, the wind can swirl, and Chad, there's a lot of times when you've played and I've played, little holes can really get you. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens.
There's no question about it. Obviously, Scotty Scheffler is the odds-on favorite to win the tournament. Is there any reason to believe he's not going to win?
The only thing that I saw today watching his press conference was one of the reporters said they noticed he sounded like he had a little bit of a cold. But honestly, I think, Scheffler is the kind of guy that can overcome that. This was a guy who had a, glass inside of his hand at the beginning of the year, and, at the end of the year had surgery then. And since he's come back from that, he's played pretty good. People can say, well, he hasn't won, but he's been really consistent. And in typical Scheffler fashion, he's great with the media. I think he's taken a lot of cues from what Tiger did when Tiger was on top of his game with the media. He knows how to really answer the questions the right way. He never divulges too much information, but he gives just enough to keep the media interested. And I think he's very savvy that way. And obviously he's been coached up really well by his team and his agent. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of his career, that not only is he a great player, but I think he's a really good guy off the course, and I think he's dealt with the media really well.
No question. Tommy Fleetwood is one of the good guys on tour. I really like him. What do you see from him that will give him a chance to contend this week?
Yeah, I think, Chad, the one thing about him is that he's just been knocking on the door for so many years here on the PGA Tour. Had that close call a couple of years ago up in Canada with the Canadian Open there when Nick Taylor made that long putt in the playoff there.
Incredible
and I think
finish.
He's just so consistent. Yeah, that was a hell of a tournament a few years ago. And, I think the thing is with Fleetwood, he's got such a consistent ball flight. He hits that little right-to-left draw. That's his go-to shot. And I think he's got a ball flight and a swing that can translate to any course and any conditions. We saw him years ago kind of come onto the scene at the Ryder Cup when they played over in Paris. And, man, was he so consistent that week when he got paired with Francesco Molinari that week. And I think he's always, since then, it seems like he's Mr. Consistency. He's always there, and that's a hallmark of a really good player. And, to me, that's the one thing in a major championship. If you don't beat yourself, you don't make anything higher than a bogey, you got a great chance to win it at the end of the week. And I think Fleetwood's the kind of guy that you don't see him get angry too much on the golf course. So I definitely think he's going to be in the mix this week.
All right, give me a couple of guys from the LIV Tour that you think have a chance to have a good week.
Well, I think you got to go with Bryson. I think Bryson for sure. I just love what this guy's done. I think a couple things. Number one, he's reformed his body and his golf game. But I think in the other side, Chad, is doing all this stuff with YouTube and doing all this fun stuff away from the competitive side of it. He's hung around some pretty famous people, some other celebrities from other walks of life, pro athletes and stuff. So it's kind of allowed him to get into his own skin and really be himself. And I think he's become like a fan favorite that way because he's doing all this cool stuff. He's hitting shots over his house. And I think he's not saying this nonsensical stuff like he was saying years ago, like I'm going to turn Augusta into a par 67. Like he can now just go play golf and enjoy it because he's got all these other ventures outside of competitive golf where he's not just like a guy in a lab, like trying to get all bulked up and hit the ball in 9 million miles. He's doing all this other stuff to grow the game, and I think that's really allowed him when he goes out and plays to kind of just enjoy it. And I think he's going to do really well. I think the other couple guys I would say, I think Koepka's always a guy who's going to be there. Koepka, whether you like the guy or not, Brooks Koepka is built for the majors. He is so good in major championships. His record in majors is phenomenal. And I think he has a different kind of focus in these tournaments. And then Patrick Reed, I mean, whether you like the guy or not, and a lot of people don't, Patrick Reed has got he's been playing pretty good this year on LIV. And I think he's the kind of guy that, going to Augusta under the radar, he can definitely be there. And he's one of those guys, he'll just block out all the noise too from what people say about him. He just doesn't care, and he's a polarizing guy, probably one of the most polarizing players we've ever seen in golf for various reasons. But he can definitely be there, and Phil too. I mean, I don't think Phil will win, but do I think Phil could be in the mix come Sunday? Heck yeah, he could be. I mean, we remember back in the late 90s, Jack Nicklaus had a look at it on Sunday the year Marco Mira won in 98. So there's no doubt that Mickelson definitely knows that golf course well. And when he goes down Magnolia Lane, I think there's something special that comes out of him, and he says, I'm going to take my game up to another level. And just seeing him on the range day, chatting it up with Butch Harmon a little bit, you can see he's in a much better place than he was a few years ago with the whole drama with LIV and the PGA Tour. And I think if Phil's there on Sunday, another guy that, is going to suck a lot of people into watch for sure.
Well, heck, he had that terrific final round a couple of years ago and came in second at the Masters, which was amazing. Now, what about Rory McIlroy? Is he going to have the classic Rory game where he gets off to a bad start and finishes strong but comes up short? How do you see it playing out for Rory?
Yeah, it's interesting, Chad, because it seems like all the time that he's trying to do something different. Like I heard this week, I was listening to Brad Faxon talk about it. And Brad, for years, has been coaching Rory, on like the short game and putting and things like that. And he said this week, I guess Brad Faxon was saying that Rory's like reading some different books and stuff this week to take his mind off of the tournament. I don't know. I look at it like, you know what, like Rory to me has got to get off to a good start if he's going to win this tournament. There's been too many times where he shoots 72 or 3 or 4, and then, yeah, he kind of rallies on the weekend and, maybe has like a backdoor 5th or 6th place finish, which is okay. But for a guy his stature, he's looking to win. And, I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, Rory's going for the career Grand Slam. He's had a great year to start. I mean, he won at Pebble Beach, dominated at Pebble Beach, and then he won at TPC Sawgrass playing kind of like his B-plus game, which said a lot about Rory. That says a lot about his growth. But at the same time, like, I don't think you can play your B or B-plus game to win at Augusta National. Now, he played solid a couple weeks ago at Houston, which they kind of replicated the setup to Augusta with the rough and the greens and all that. But I just think the first round is so huge for Rory. I mean, you can't win it on Thursday, but you could definitely shoot yourself out of the tournament with a round like that's not under par. So I think that first day for Rory is everything for him, Chad.
Wow. All right, you're good at this, but give us your dark horse. You gave us the good one of Oberg, I think last year, the year before, and he came in and had a strong performance. Who's your dark horse this year?
Sepp Straka. I got to go with Sepp Straka. He grew up he was born in Austria, but he's lived in America for a long time. He played college golf at Georgia. I think he's been a pro since 2016, having a really good year on the tour. Won in the desert in Palm Springs in January, had a nice finish at Pebble Beach. Played pretty solid in the Florida swing, had a really good finish at Bay Hill after a tough first day. And I just love Sepp Straka's game. Sepp Straka to me is like a three-point shooter in the NBA. He just keeps shooting. He keeps firing away, and he's won on some interesting golf courses. I mean, so he's a guy that, he makes a lot of birdies, and he's the kind of guy that if he's in the mix, he'll just go for it. And I love that mentality of the way he plays. The only concern I have with him, Chad, is, a lot of people always talk about how Augusta's a right, there's a lot of dogleg right to lefts. Like 13's a good example of that. But you look at most of the guys who've won at Augusta, the right-handers like Nicklaus, you look at Tiger, their go-to shot was a fade. And Straka at times under pressure, he'll start hooking the ball. So that would be my only concern with him. But I think as a dark horse pick and a guy that could be in the mix come Sunday, he's a Southerner. Even, like I said, he played at Georgia. I think he lives in Alabama now. So he definitely knows the grass and playing golf in the South and the climate down there and how to handle the wind and chip off of tight lies. I definitely think he could be in the mix come Sunday. And, he's the kind of guy that if he was there, I mean, I could see him going for every pin on Sunday saying, I got nothing to lose. No one expected me to be there. And the scary thing about him, too, is, like, he could be a guy that the U.S. might have to go up against in the Ryder Cup because he's obviously European by birth. And then that would be a tough matchup at a course like Bethpage to play him in singles on a Sunday.
Oh, by the way, if I could play one hole at Augusta, I'd take 13. I love that hole. I love the shot from Phil in 2010 off the Pine Needles with the 6-iron. Like, I would love to play that hole.
Yeah, oh, yeah, what a shot that was back in the day. Yeah, that was an incredible shot. I mean, talk about the risk and reward. It's a beautiful hole, man, because there's been some guys who their careers have been made on that hole, and then some guys, their careers have been decimated on that hole, too. So it's a great hole, man. It's everything a par 5 should be, I think. And Golf Channel was talking about it a lot today. Actually, Augusta National bought land from Augusta Country Club to extend that hole and make it, I think it's like 540 or 545 now. So
Amazing.
It's a heck of a hole, man. There's a lot of risk and reward on it. And, it's a perfect par 5 for these guys because there's so much elevation in the fairway there. You could have a real hanging lie where, like, it's an uphill lie, and you're trying to hit a high left to right shot. So you need a lot of club head speed and a lot of lower body strength, and then you really got to be able to turn your body really, really well through the ball to hit that kind of shot. So that sets up good for a Scheffler, a McIlroy, obviously Tiger back in the day, Nicklaus back in the day. So guys who are strong, especially in the lower body, really have a great advantage hitting a shot like that into a par 5.
PGA David Coleman, you are a cold piece, my friend. I love talking golf with you. I appreciate you taking time for the show, and I look forward to catching up with you on Monday to recap the Masters.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. It's a phenomenal week of golf, and just watching everything today with the pregame, watching guys hit balls on the range, and hearing about all these different guys, and even with the live guys there and everything, it just makes everybody want to come back together, and hopefully all we can, the tours can merge and we can see these guys more than just a few times a year because the sport's got a lot of compelling players right now, even though Tiger's at the real back end of his career, but it's still a lot of fun to watch, and you never know at Augusta. There's so much unpredictability on a great golf course like this.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll talk Monday.
Sounds good, dude.
There you go. There's PGA David Coleman. I do love the Masters. It's a spectacular tournament. It's a wonderful golf course. And if they have stuff taken out by a hurricane, they probably have access to, like, the Garden of Eden where they can implant trees and just bring them over and just plant them there on the grounds at Augusta. All right, we'll keep things rolling. We got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing. Trailblazers tomorrow are in action, taking on the Utah Jazz in Salt Lake City at the Delta Center. That game will tip at 6. Our coverage starts at 4 with Blazers Game Day on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, big thanks to PGA David Coleman. I love Dave because he loves golf and he can talk it as well as anyone. And I'm certainly excited about the tournament this weekend. And I can't believe the final week of the Trailblazers season is upon us. But I was looking at the extended forecast. It's very productive for the life of Chad Doing, where we have, let's see here, decent weather on Friday, not so good weather on Saturday. But then starting on Sunday the 13th, we're going to have temperatures anywhere from 64 up to 70 with partly sunny skies. And that weather looks like it's going to continue all the way up until the 19th. And then we'll have a couple of off days with rain on the 20th and 21st, but back to the sun on the 22nd. Yeah, I'll be playing golf soon. Very happy about that. Very, very happy about that. The days are getting longer. My life is about to get better, and it's all good. I'm still recovering from that near-death experience I had on Sunday night when I took the fall over the cement curb in the parking lot. I've got this blister now on my hand where I took the fall, the brunt of the fall, where I tore out a chunk of one of the calluses on my hands, and it's healing up. But I want to go practice golf tonight over at Golf Tech, but I'm worried about that spot being irritated. So it's like, do I press my luck and go for it? I think what I might do is just keep it simple and hit little chip shots and practice my short game for Augusta. But I'm excited about next week. Tomorrow, I'll have an abbreviated Rip City Drive from 3 until 4. And then my man Chris Burkhart will take over at 4 o'clock for Trailblazers game day, and then we got tip-off with the Jazz at 6 o'clock. I'll have the Trailblazer pregame show on the network starting at 5 o'clock. So that's what's on tap for tomorrow. Thursday, I'm excited because Brian Henniger, PGA Pro, is going to be in studio with Alex Brink talking Masters. That's coming up on Thursday. So get plenty of golf talk in as we get this tournament underway coming on Thursday. And I would like to visit. Bladholm said earlier that he's been there, and it's definitely on my bucket list of things to do. I just want to go and check out the grounds to see what it looks like. I don't expect them to ask me to play. If they decide to offer me an invite to play, I would definitely do it, but that's never going to happen. But it would be nice to go and attend just to check out the grounds. And I would love to see how it would match up with my eye based on what I've seen on television all these years. What a magical place. All right, big thanks to all of our